Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the digital session series of the National Ergonomics Conference. My name is Rachel Michael. I am the program co-chair, and I'll be your host for today. Before we start, I want to draw your attention to the widgets on your screen. These are movable and resizable, so you can enlarge the presentation window to fill the screen if you want. The resource list widget has the slides, and they are available for download. You'll also see the Q&A widget where you can ask questions throughout this webcast, and we'll ask them to our speakers at the end of the presentation as time allows. Also, please note that this webcast is being recorded and will be available on demand later in the Ergo Central page on our website, www.ergoexpo.com. So today, we are thrilled to bring you a fantastic panel to talk about the financial impact and risks your company should consider as more employees work from home. Today, we've got Julia Abate, CPE, Executive Director for the Ergonomics Center, NC State University. Julia holds a master's degree in Industrial and Operations Engineering from the University of Michigan and is certified by the Board of Certification in Professional Ergonomics. For more than 23 years, she has helped companies develop and grow their ergonomics programs, and she currently serves as one of the conference chairs for the Applied Ergonomics Conference. Ben Zavitz, President, Chief Ergonomist at Ergo Human Performance, LLC. Ben is a board-certified professional ergonomist with more than 20 years of global experience implementing ergonomics programs and process improvements. He has a BSc in kinesiology and ergonomics from the University of Waterloo, a master's certificate in project management from George Washington University, and is certified in Lean, Six Sigma, and Kaizen. He is the current president of the Applied Ergonomics Society and is a member of the National Occupational Research Agenda Musculoskeletal Health Cross-Sector Council. Woody Dwyer, MS, CPE, CIE, is the Assistant Vice President for Technical Solutions and Risk Solutions at Hanover Insurance. Woody leads a team of talented technical directors who focus on major insurance lines and key customer industries. He is passionate about helping businesses assess their operational risks and work towards building a safe and productive workplace, conducting numerous high-impact presentations throughout the world on diverse topics ranging from implementing effective risk management strategies to developing effective and efficient safety and ergonomics programs. Woody has written or been featured in numerous industry and trade publications discussing workers' compensation, health and safety, and ergonomics. And Tiffany Gaylor, OTR, Office Ergonomics Team Lead, BP America. Tiffany Gaylor is an occupational therapist and ergonomics consultant with over 20 years of combined experience. She has been an office ergonomics consultant and program manager for large oil and gas companies in the Houston area since 2008. Tiffany specializes in providing a customized and personal experience to her clients with a focus on behavioral challenges, changes, and prevention. I'm sure some of those behaviors are challenging, though. She currently works with Human Tech Velocity EHS, providing on-site and remote office ergonomics services exclusively to BP America, both in the Houston area and nationally. We've also got Mike Bartholomew, who is going to moderate the panel. And Mike, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for all of those wonderful bios and introductions. Again, BodyBilt welcomes all of you to this webinar today. Again, I'm Mike Bartholomew, your moderator. I'm the Director of Sales and Operations and Training for BodyBilt. I've been with BodyBilt for 16 years, and I'm excited to be able to moderate this webinar today. I want to thank all of you participating today, especially Julia, Ben, Tiffany, and Woody. And I hope that everybody that's viewing this webinar is healthy and safe. For me and most of you, this new normal started 8 months ago. As a matter of fact, 8 months ago, really today. On March 12th, when all of my travels were abruptly canceled and working from home became the new normal. Cancellation after cancellation after cancellation was announced. Our email inboxes started filling up from companies about COVID-19. And at that time, I contemplated just how long this was going to last for. Maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month. Well, fast forward now, 245 days, and here we are. As we were discussing what a relevant topic would be for this webinar, we kept coming back to working from home, but we knew we had to come up with something different and put a different spin on it. And that's how we came up with the topic, the financial impacts and risks companies now face while their employees are working from home. Ben and Julia will discuss the processes associated with establishing a home office program and some of the different resources for employees. Tiffany is going to discuss a case study and equipment and furniture options. Woody will discuss some of the insurance considerations that the companies need to think about. So without further ado, I yield the microphone to Ben and Julia, and then Tiffany and Woody in that order.
All right, so as Mike mentioned, right, mid-March, COVID hits, becomes a worldwide pandemic, right? And then over the months, companies have struggled of, what do we do and how are things changing and this constant evolution. So initially it started out with everybody take your laptop home, do the best you can to work remotely. And of course, over a couple of days, and then those couple of days turned to weeks, and then weeks turned to months, and then employees started to realize this work from home is not going away, right? They need help to set up their home offices properly. So in the first couple of months of this pandemic, it was really do-it-yourself type solutions. Can you use a pillow for more lumbar support? Can you use a book to raise your laptop or your monitor? Could you use a box as a footrest, or maybe even use your ironing board as a standing workstation? Now what we're starting to see is more employees are starting to have discomfort and lower productivity. Early on, the University of Cincinnati did a study and working from home, and what they found out of this 800-person study they found is 43% of the chairs were not at the correct height. 69% of the people were leaning forward. 73% had no lumbar support. 25% of the people using laptops had them too low. People that did have monitors didn't have them in the right height. They were either too high or too low. And a lot of people were twisting their necks to view monitors, especially as using monitors and using laptops. So now as we progress along the summer months, the fall months, we're starting to see more employees start to experience pain and discomfort in their necks, their backs, their shoulders. And some employees are even starting to report injuries. So as this classic triangle here shows, the progression of musculoskeletal disorders starts to emerge. So at the bottom, we have sort of the green zone, no discomfort, right? Over time, people are starting to experience discomfort. They're getting into that yellow zone. And then once that discomfort happens on a regular basis, it becomes frequent. Now we're into that orange zone. And then some people have actually progressed right into that red zone where they actually have legitimate injuries, filing for workers' comp claims. On the other side, we see the approved solutions. So early on in COVID, it was do it yourself, right? Can you use a book? Can you use a box, a pillow? That progressed to low-cost solutions. Can we give employees keyboards or a mouse or maybe a headset, right? Now we're starting to see this shift where companies are letting employees go back to the office to get the equipment that they had in their office, whether it be dual monitors, their ergonomic chairs, maybe some sit-stand workstations. And even some companies have gone the next step where they even have stipends for employees, right? And they've established contracts with furniture manufacturers and e-commerce companies to do direct shipment to employees for the equipment that they need. So kind of why did this change? So many surveys have been done over the last several months. And one in particular was the PricewaterhouseCoopers survey, where they looked at 120 executives and 1,200 employees. And what they found is 55% of the people want to continue working from home even after COVID. And we break those numbers out when what we see is 82% of the people want to work from home at least one day a week. 72% want to work from home at least 2 days a week. And almost a third say they never want to go back to the office ever. And we compare that to pre-COVID, where it was only, 39% of the employees actually worked from home or wanted to work from home. One of the challenges always been with work from home is the productivity, right? So one of the questions that was surveyed was how productive are employees really at home? And overall, it's about 70% of the employees are equal, if not more productive at home than they were in the office. And in particular, employers are finding that employees are very productive at home. So this has created this shift of maybe working from home is not a bad thing. And we're going to see this continue on for the coming months. Even just recently, a study published last week found that 80% of employers believe their organizations should absorb the cost to set up home offices. even if employees only work part-time from home. So prior to COVID, work from home used to be a privilege, right? And many employees that did work from home would not consider asking their employer to pay for home office expenses. But today, work from home is no longer a matter of choice. Everybody is forced to do this, and there's multiple days a week where people are working in poor workstations. So initially, a lot of companies provided technology such as laptops and webcams and things like that. And now it's time where employers have to start providing additional equipment that's needed to really set up these home offices. So at this point, I turn over to Julia to talk about the home office.
Thank you, Ben. So the missing piece, as Ben mentioned, we started off where everybody's working from home, they work with what they have, and now we're moving into a longer term strategy and companies are considering making this a more permanent change. So before they do that, they really need to think about what they want to do to establish that home office policy and program. It's important to set up a program because you want to make sure that all employees are treated consistently and efficiently so that any issues they have are resolved. And before companies think about doing this for the long term, we need to make sure that you've considered all of the different resources and budgets that are attached to this. And we're going to go a little deeper into some of these details. So we're going to talk about some of the processes that people need, and we're going to talk about some of the resources that we need as we go forward. Now, some of the things that we want to consider. When your employees are having issues, there needs to be an injury reporting process that you may already have, but it needs to be documented for those working from home in a clear manner. So consider setting up a resource and documenting the process that people need to take in order to report those injuries. These should be clearly outlined and established for the employees. Training is also important. Initially, employees may need to address some of the issues that they've had, and they could have done it with resources online. But you want to make sure, too, that as you provide equipment for employees, that they know how to use it and they know how to use it properly. This can take the form of an online training. It could be self-assessments that you provide them. It could be furniture guidelines. But you need to make sure that the employees have those resources and the knowledge on how to use the equipment that they're provided for. The next step is furniture. So furniture guidelines could be provided for folks who might get a stipend. Companies are giving stipends ranging from $100 to $500 or more. And when employees go out and look at all the different furniture and all the different equipment that's available to them, it's helpful to have some definition as to what might be good for them to get. So if they're going to get an adjustable table, what should the height range be? What should the size of that table be? Another option is for companies to pre-select some of this furniture, whether it's through a vendor who has a dedicated website for your company with approved equipment and furniture that the employees can select, or just having vendors provide packages, but limiting the amount of things that the employees can use so that they're more approved equipment and you know that they're going to make a difference. What you really don't want is employees to have some money to spend and they go and they buy the prettiest desk they can find that might not function for them, or they buy something that they might not really need in the long term, like maybe a file cabinet, when they really need a chair. And along those guidelines, you also want to consider the fact that what if somebody does spend their stipend and they buy a desk, but they're still having pain because they need a chair? How are you going to fund that? How are you going to handle that with those employees? And you want to consider some of these different scenarios and set aside funding for that. The assessment piece of it, Ben's going to dive into a little bit more, but you want to make sure that you have a methodology for employees who need help in the home office to request help, whether that's a virtual assessment, a self-assessment, or having someone, one-on-one with them virtually or live. How are you going to handle those? And when recommendations come out of those assessments, how are you going to allow the employees to get that equipment? Lastly, we don't want to forget about the behavioral and social piece of it. That might be providing resources for employees on what meeting best practices are. How can they network with their peers? A lot of folks are spending so much more time on Zoom meetings. They're blurring the hours in the day between home responsibilities and work. And they're finding they're working actually longer hours when they're working from home. So can you give them some tips on what to do about that? Maybe it's recommendations on when to take breaks, when to do some stretching, or when they should stand versus sit. providing those resources for the employees on the social and emotional side is important too as we go forward. So let's look at budgeting a little bit deeper here. Ben mentioned the survey from the Global Workplace Analytics that looked at the future of home office cost sharing. And over 80% of employees did feel that, actually employers felt that the organizations should absorb some of those costs from the home office setups for employees who are working from home full time. So that work from home model has changed a lot over the past 6 months. And companies are looking at, what do I need to do now to help my employees succeed? They had a great setup in the office, but now they're working from home. And instead of working at the kitchen table or with whatever resources they had, now companies are starting to realize that in order to help those employees be successful and productive in the long run, can they equip them to do their jobs in a manner that's going to keep them from getting hurt. So we want to make sure that we're considering that cost. So now the survey also said that more than half of the employers allowed employees initially to take equipment from their office to their home. I can guarantee you most employers didn't think about the insurance aspects of what he's going to talk about, because there could have been a liability if someone had gotten hurt in that transfer. But a lot of the employees who are working from home did bring in some of their home office equipment, or some of their equipment from their office to their home. But now we've got nearly 25% of the organizations expect that 75% of their workforces are going to be working from home at least 3 days a week. So are we going to have to outfit those employees with equipment in the office and at home? And how is that going to be handled? Some 22% of companies are still undecided if they're going to do work from home long term, but that means 80% of them are still considering doing that for the long term. And nearly half of the respondents that responded said that they were unaware of the workers' comp and health insurance liabilities of not providing employees with an ergonomic home office. So Woody's going to address that in a little bit as well. So looking at the budget, what are some of the considerations that you need to think about? First is equipment. Are you providing keyboards, docking stations, monitors for the home office? And what is standard versus what is non-standard that employees might need to have some additional requests for? So if a standard mouse comes with every laptop and a standard keyboard, does it come with every laptop, or do they have to request it? What if they want a vertical mouse or a split keyboard? Is that something above and beyond what is standard? And how would the employees go about requesting and procuring that equipment? Same with furniture. Are you going to provide a stipend for employees, and what is that amount? How do they get reimbursed? Or do you provide a website with a vendor where they can order that equipment, and then what department pays for it? Where are those funds coming through, and how do you make that easy for the employee? And when you do get that equipment, you also have to consider, how is it installed? Do you have the employee install it, or do you pay for that white glove service so that you ensure the employee might not get injured building up their sit-stand desk or moving their chair up to the third floor apartment that they have? The other thing to consider is, if an employee leaves, what happens to that equipment? Do they keep it? Does the company want it back? And if so, how is that done? And if, again, the employee needs more than what their stipend allows, how do they get that? The next step is technology. A lot of us have invested a lot more in technology, whether it's for online meetings, software to do that, the headsets, the webcams, the microphones. What do your employees need to be successful when working from home, and how are you providing that to them? It might be in the form of a stipend for their broadband width, for their internet. What do they need to be successful? And lastly, making sure that you have all the resources planned out. Who's going to manage your processes? Who's going to work with the vendors? Where's the funding coming from, and how is it being distributed to the employees? These are all different things that you need to think about from the budget. Now, Ben's going to dive a little bit deeper now into the assessment piece of it.
All right, thanks, Julia. Yeah, so assessments, obviously a big part of this program. So initially it started out with, can we give employees handouts on, perfect office setups? And some companies even had software systems where you could log in, the employees could answer a series of questions, they could get feedback. So a lot of people just jumped on this right away and said, we've got this is how we do this. But I think one of the challenges with this initially was a lot of these guidelines and this software was really designed around traditional offices, right? Where people had adjustable chairs, they had pretty good equipment, pretty good workstations. It was just a matter of fine tuning those. But what we see, during the COVID times is, the work from home office has, wide variety. We have people working at coffee tables. We have people working at kitchen tables, couches, beds, kitchen countertops. A lot of these didn't have adjustability. So a lot of these initial, guidelines really were not achievable, right? When one of the guidelines says just adjust your chair, right? Well, if you have a chair that doesn't adjust, it's pretty hard to do that. So that really kind of evolved into, maybe we need a different approach, right? Until at least some of these guidelines and the software can catch up to, the wide variation of the work from home environment. But one of the things we're really seeing right now is this huge need for these remote assessments, right? Which is really, the employee takes a couple pictures, maybe a video of themselves working, and then they would send it, to an ergonomics, to an ergonomist. Prior to a call, they could review it, kind of have an idea of what's going on. And then they can get on a call with that person, a virtual call, whether it be, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, whatever platform you choose to use. And then during that call would just basically be a series of questions where you can ask the employees about their setup, the type of issues you're seeing. And then from there, you can make various types of recommendations. And one of the things we're seeing is the recommendations are, as Julia mentioned, they're kind of all over the place, right? It really depends what that employee's need is. Can they use standard equipment? Do they need something that's different because of their setup or, any sort of pain or discomfort they may be experiencing? So really kind of the outcome of these assessments is varied depending on sort of the setup and the different things that you see. So now I'd like to turn it over to Tiffany to talk about a corporate case study.
At BP, we did already have an established formal ergonomic program. We provided on-site, mostly local here in Houston, almost all face-to-face, one-on-one at the desk, with the occasional remote evaluation. Almost overnight, we had to transform the entire program to be fully remote, not only providing remote evaluations for people that were working from home, but also being able to provide those evaluations for people that were our essential workers that were still on site, providing evaluations for people outside of the Houston area, which became national, US, and even global. Included in our process is our self-assessment online. This includes education, a list of questions, and then also some recommendations. We have a team that reviews the self-assessments and gives referrals and ergonomic contact information to the people that may need further ergonomic evaluation and a one-on-one remote call. The end user is also able to use the self-request button in their self-assessment. They can reach the Ergo program through email, through phone, through our internal social media, Teams chat, in several different ways. One of the biggest differences that our end users will see is that we provide them with a PowerPoint instructional on how to take pictures and videos from different angles in different ways so that we can use those to conduct our video call meeting, in which we'll use the pictures and videos and then also use the video itself during the call to review items, which might include their setup, what they had in the office, what they might need at home, the equipment. We set up somewhat of a remote ergo lab so I can show things on the video call. We'll talk about if they have any history, ergonomic issues at the time or even previously, and what we might need to get for that person. We have found that during that time, people are a lot more open in telling us what they might need because of the one-on-one. It's not an open office work setting. So that's a plus. Some of the recommendations that we provided have definitely changed, and that is due to a company work from home fund. Our fund is for each employee, and it's provided to the employee by their own team or by their business unit. So this entails quite a bit of line manager training, education, and discussions to make sure that they're able to allow employees to get those items in a timely fashion, but that they also understand the range of items that we recommend, which may stay within those funds, but oftentimes may go outside of that fund, especially since that person may be someone with a current issue or a past issue or a medical issue, even maybe an accommodation where we go well beyond those funds. Another thing that we talk with the line manager about and that we had to put a lot of time into is looking at the priority of items. It's very different from what we would have recommended in the office. At home, we might be looking at things outside of just their work. So we're looking at the safety, the job functions, the environment that they're in. Do they have any current issues or past ergonomic issues? Is there any medical history? Are there any accommodations set up? So with that, we might look at a certain person who's up and down a lot. Maybe they have kids. Maybe they're teaching school on the side. So they're not sitting for long periods. So maybe a higher end wireless headset might be the higher priority for that person. Where someone that might sit and do data entry and spreadsheets all day long, a chair might be a priority for that person. So we're really working with that person one-on-one to customize the recommendations for that person. We do provide follow-up and training to the employee. So we'll look at the items that were recommended, what have they received, what haven't they received, and what we can do to assist with that. That might entail even more line manager discussions. Are there additional options that we might be able to look at? Are there additional funds? If not, are we looking at self-purchase items? Where can we find some additional options for that person that will still fit within our furniture and ergonomic guidelines? Another thing we'll talk with them about is what is their transition plan for the next year? Are they going to stay remote? And some of them may not know the answer to this. So it's nice to know what they think is going to happen and what they would like to happen. So are they going to stay remote? Are they going to go back to the office when it opens? Are they going to alternate between the two? Might they go to a satellite site? Or might they be returning to a travel position? All of those things would be considered when we discuss with them and decide on a priority list for their items recommended. Another big piece of our recommendations that we had to do very quickly during COVID was our vendor relations. We had to look at which of the equipment that our vendors use that meet our ergo guidelines and are able to be used at home, which items were best for home use, because not everything that we used in the office might be best for home. We had to look at specials and discounts that our vendors could possibly provide, and didn't matter whether it was BP purchased or self-purchased. What could we do to help our employees? Were our vendors able to provide us flyers? We use these flyers during our recommendations. When we email the employee the recommendations, we attach those flyers. It's a very big help for the employee to actually see the item. We can review it during our call, and they can use that in that line manager discussion. Vendor ordering sites, this has been very helpful for us. Our vendors are able to provide customized recommended product and ordering pages. As you can see, the BodyBilt page is here. It's been extremely helpful, not only for the ergonomic evaluator to use during the eval and show the employee, but also for the employee to order items and for them to use this information with their line manager to discuss their needs and get further funds if needed. Referring to other services, all of our other services have also gone remote, so they're all available to our employees. So we want to make sure that everybody's referred to any other particular services they may need. And sometimes those services are actually able to help us get further funds for our employees that may need items outside of the funds. And then following up, again, following up on if they were able to speak with the other services on the equipment. Is there more line manager discussion needed? Were they able to go through their priorities? All of that will help. One of our consideration factors, so things that we were concerned about, are we able to see the whole picture? One 10-second video or a few pictures may not tell us the entire story. So sometimes it requires quite a bit of follow-up after our evaluation. The furniture provided by the company, since we require people to see Ergo prior to using their funds. Most people do it, not everybody, but we know that the items that we have picked, we've tested, we know how they work, we can instruct on how they work, we know they're safe. But what about the items that the employees already own or items that were self-purchased outside of our guidelines? How do we ensure the safety and maintenance of these items? It's not as easy as just sending the work crew to go fix it. Also, the environment. I've had people send me pictures of them working in closets, in bathrooms, and even in the garage. So how do we maintain the safety within those environments? And then also the distractions at home. Not something that we ever had to consider in the office. That could be anywhere from alternate family members to pets to even the TV. So I believe Woody is going to speak further on some of these topics.
Hey, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you for the opportunity to join everyone today. Working from home has been an emerging trend over the last 10 years or more, and COVID-19 has accelerated employers and employees to quickly implement and adopt working from home procedures due to state travel restrictions. Ben, Julie, and Tiffany have done a really nice job outlining the office ergonomic considerations for employees working at home. And what I want to cover today is potential other insurance-related risks that employers should review and have a plan to address. We have all experienced this new normal that we have today. And we're balancing a lot when we work at home. And when you think about what we deal with today, we have to deal with broadband performance, outside noise, children, spouses, and of course, dog barking in the background, let alone struggling to try to connect to Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams meeting. And for some families, there's been a fight for workspace, which causes some people to work wherever they can, when they can. When it comes to insurance, there's several things employers need to consider, with many employees working from home as the new normal. So, firstly, job descriptions. Employers should update their job descriptions for employees to cover the new potential expectations and job responsibilities, and the safety expectations while working at home. Though there might not be significant changes, and only certain employees may have new responsibilities while working at home, it's important to review and update as needed and work with your HR team to do this. Employers should also consider developing or updating their work from home policies and procedures. A policy will set the stage for remote working conditions, and they should cover some of these other things, like employees need to know when they're on the clock and what are their typical work hours, when are their lunch hours, and set these expectations for employees. And for certain corporations, they may vary and may be fluid depending on the employee's needs as they balance these new work-life expectations. From a workplace safety standpoint, there are a number of changes that are things that companies should look at. When you're looking at the two types of accidents, there's the injuries caused by general accidents. Those are the things that, or maybe somebody tripped over a cable, they had a burn, or they fell down the stairs or tripped over an object. The second type is what we talked about already, is those office ergonomic concerns due to improper setups, poor desks or chairs, or people using improperly their workstations or chairs that they have. Now, when it comes to the general areas, there's some additional risks that one needs to consider when working at home. Firstly, walking surfaces and stairs, cords, cables, toys, pets, these cause tripping hazards. Walking up and down stairs, especially if employees have to carry objects when going up and down stairs. Wet surfaces. And in coming up in the winter months, we will have snow and ice to deal with, which all impacts the potential for slip, trip, and fall. There is an insurance exposure called drive on business related to workers' compensation that employers and employees should be aware of. Because employees are now working at home, they may be required to go to deliver something or go pick something up as part of their normal job duties. If that employee is driving in an accident, that could be considered a workers' compensation claim. So it's very important to look at what are the responsibilities and the expectations for those employees who may now drive on business as part of their job. There could be a general liability exposure. As we heard earlier, we may have office ergonomic equipment delivered. So Tiffany may have a BodyBilt chair going to one of their employees. If they have that white glove service that Julia talked about, and that delivery person is bringing the equipment into the home, and say the dog bites that person, that could be a general liability. exposure, or that person trips while in the home or on the premise as a result of that job-related function. So there could be things related to general liability. Of course, we have ergonomics and manual material handling. If employees are moving furniture or equipment to set up their new workstation for their job, or they're moving boxes that were delivered to the employee as part of their job responsibilities, moving and injuring the back might be a workers' compensation claim. There's things related to electrical safety. Because of where people may need to set up their workplace, they could have extension cords, and they may have extension cords daisy-chained just to fit the spaces that they have, which can create electrical safety concerns. The outlets may not be designed or grounded properly to fit all of the equipment the employees now have, depending on the age of the home. There could be lack of surge protection for the electrical equipment, and again, if depending on where they work, they may not have the right ventilation for all of the equipment they may have now that they're working from home. When it comes to insurance, and if there is a claim, it's very important that we know how we're going to help that employee if they do have a non-emergent injury or illness. So it's important to have a plan that we know where to send your employee to an in-network medical provider to manage that claim. As a result, you may need to develop a plan to communicate that to the managers and employees, because the usual in-network provider may not be near where that employee lives. It might have been very near to where the office is and had a general communicated plan. So if an employee has an injury or illness and it's non-emergent, they need to know where to go to get the proper care. So as a result of these exposures, there could be a potential for a workers' compensation or a general liability claim if the accident or injury resulted in the course of employment. Now, because I work in risk solutions and I'm not a claim professional, I can't go in and get into a discussion about all the types of claims that might be considered compensable. If you have a question concerning claims, please work with your agent or insurance claim professional. Now, when thinking about working from home, there are a number of things that one needs to think about. Office ergonomics and how to keep their employees safe. We've heard from the team already. It's also important to think about potential additional exposures that employees might be exposed to. And the employer should develop policies, procedures, training, and communication for managers and employees to help identify and mitigate these risks at home. Julia, do you want to summarize and close out our
Thank you, Woody. Thank you. Just referring back to the survey we spoke about earlier, only about 5% of employers are expecting things to go back to quote unquote normal once COVID is done. So if you're in the remaining 95% of employers and you're thinking about making working from home an option for your employees, whether 1 or 2 days a week or full time, encourage you to look at setting up a formal program and policy. And as you consider doing that, you want to make sure you address some of these key components before rolling that out to your employees. You want to define your program and the processes that they can go through, whether it's for claims or assessments or procuring furniture. You want to identify the resources that you're going to provide employees, including training, equipment, furniture guidelines. And lastly, you want to make sure that the budget is identified for that equipment. Make sure your either departments have it, you have a general source for it, but make sure you identify what's going to be offered and what's going to be covered. And how do they get those resources? And again, consider the insurance liability that Woody talked about. And if there is an incident, how are you going to address that? Make sure you have all of those policies in place so that it's easy for the employees to view it, so they're all treated consistently and they know how to follow those processes to make things very efficient. If you're prepared, then going forward, there won't be as many surprises and hidden costs in the long run. And your employees will be much happier, much more effective, much more efficient, and in the long run, much more productive when they're working from home. So just encourage you to think about all of these things as you're setting up that program. Now, I think we have some time for our sponsor and then some questions.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Tiffany and Woody, for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us today. It's been truly enlightening. BodyBilt has worked with a number of companies over the past 8 months, and quite honestly before that. But during these past 8 months of COVID, we've worked with companies to provide custom websites. I think maybe you saw a screenshot there, the one that we did for BP, but we've done it for a number of companies across the United States for their work from home purchases. We work with the ergonomic experts within these companies to decide which equipment is best for their programs. And whether the company is making the purchase or it's the employee that's making the purchase, you can be assured that the product that is being recommended by the ergo people is what is being purchased by the employees. And one other thing, if you have any questions whatsoever regarding any of the topics that was discussed on this webinar, my email address there is below, and you can shoot me an email and I can get it to the correct person. So it's mbartholomew@bodybilt.com. And again, we appreciate your attendance in this webinar. And Rachel, I turn the microphone back to you for the question and answer portion of the webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you to all of our speakers. A very interesting topic and a very timely topic, and a topic that I think a lot of our audience has some additional questions on. I think this is going to be a question for Tiffany, because it's really about getting employees of yours to purchase products that are recommended. So, Tiffany, can you talk a little bit more about how you go about that as an organization? If you recommend something, is that something an employee is required to purchase? Is it a recommendation? And I think the question is around what kind of documentation you do around that.
Sure. So we spent a lot of time providing webinars, lunch and learn, education, of course, remotely, to not only employees, but employee groups, to teams, to line managers, to let them know that we are involved in that process to have their employees go through ergonomics prior to making purchases. That way we can make sure that they are looking at the items that are through our approved vendors and items that meet our ergonomic guidelines. That way we can ensure the quality of the item. We do a lot of follow-up, especially with our ergonomic evaluation users. That way we can make sure they are looking at the right things. We share the screen, pull up the items, send them a follow-up email with the links. We also put them in touch with our vendors, especially if there's local vendors, which we prefer to use. We do lots of follow-up even after they've gotten the product to make sure that they got the right product and that they're properly trained in how to use it.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany. If anyone wants to grab this next question, it's actually a question from numerous people. Do you have a range for that kind of stipend that an employee might receive, or a range of what one should expect to be able to provide? Many of us saw the headlines that a large tech company was offering $1,000 in a stipend for home office equipment or furniture. But does somebody want to answer the question about how much we should plan on for an employer to provide that?
I can start with that one. I know I've spoken to some clients that initially they might have started off with a $100 stipend, which employees used at that point when they were working from laptops to maybe get a keyboard and a mouse or something to raise their laptop. As things have progressed, I think the companies are getting more generous. They're looking at anywhere up to $1,000 to $1,500 as something that would purchase the full range of equipment, from the chair, the desk, monitor arms, whatever that full complement for the office. At least that's what I've seen. It truly depends on the company and what their policies were beforehand. Most companies have ranged at least in that middle, maybe that $500 to $1,000 range. I don't know, Ben, if you have any other thoughts there that you've seen out there.
Yeah, kind of similar type of issues, right? It started in that kind of $100 range or less, right? Can we get somebody an inexpensive mouse or a keyboard? To in that few $100 range, and it's really almost case by case, right? It really depends on what employees have. Like I had one situation where an employee lived in a 100-year-old house, and her spouse worked on a different shift than she did, so they never ate together. So they did not have a kitchen table. right? She didn't have a desk and she didn't have a chair. So, that situation is very different than somebody who already has a desk and has some equipment. So, so in that case, that was different, right? The company was willing to spend, more money for that specific situation. But yeah, kind of that same trend. It really depends on what the company policy is as far as what they're allowing for different types of equipment. But yeah, I think the general range is, $100 to $1,200 seems to be kind of the ball where most people are at.
I find that a lot of times the ones that are on the higher end are the folks that have vetted the furniture. They have prepackaged deals. They've worked with vendors so that they can get the table, the chair, and maybe a monitor arm for a set price from a vendor. And then the employee might be able to choose between a couple models or a couple colors. And those seem to be the more established programs.
Correct. That's what we hear as well.
Great, thank you. I know a number of our speakers, Julia hit on it, Ben and Woody did as well, the idea that we really want to have a company directive to guide us in this. However, it seems from our questions that maybe not all of our employers have that directive put in place or have that process put in place. So would someone be able to answer what the best way to approach management about getting them to pull this together into a cohesive process if it's not there?
I know that in the past I've had to do this myself in a previous employer, is just to share with them the problems that the employees are experiencing and the potential costs. Sometimes I don't like to use the cost avoidance, but with the office, that's one of the biggest areas that you can go. And, if you've got employees who are reporting wrist discomfort, back discomfort, sometimes just letting that management know, hey, we had them set up in the office, but now at home, everyone's dealing with a different set of parameters. They weren't set up like they were. And if we're going to make this a long-term option, we need to make sure that we've got the processes in place. And you mentioned the studies that Ben mentioned that, employees are saying they're more productive at home. So in order to maintain that productivity and keep that level that you're getting from the employees, we need to make sure that they're not getting hurt. When they get hurt, that productivity goes down. When they're paying attention to the wrist pain or the back pain, that productivity goes down. So finding ways to put a cost to that, whether it's productivity or the insurance aspect of it, getting those hard dollars in front of the management will sometimes help. Although I would dare say that a lot of times the management themselves are now feeling some of these things as well. So it might not be as hard of a sell as it was, 6 months ago.
Hey, Julia, you talked about the insurance perspective. If there was ergonomic risk for their company prior to working at home, those risks have not changed, and they potentially might be worse as a result of working from home. And the idea of productivity is great. The idea that people may be working longer. So as I talk about having job descriptions and identifying core work hours and even talking about work-life balance, that risk hasn't changed. So if they were seeing claims prior to, they can't expect them to just go away because now people are working at home. So I always want to have that risk conversation, the cost avoidance, the risk mitigation, and then developing a plan and what they will do if there is a claim, because they still may happen at home and they sometimes could be more difficult. So what you talked about before about having that digital assessment, being able to share photos like Tiffany talked about, they had to have a plan to deal with this. It just didn't go away because people are at home.
Yeah, and I can add to that too. One of the companies I was working with kind of went through this evolution, right? So they did, all the initial things initially. Then come June, they found out they're not letting their employees go back. Now they have thousands of employees who are going to be home for the rest of 2020, well into probably June of 2021. So they realized that they have a huge opportunity here. So one of the things that they did is they did a pilot study where they said, let's take a couple of departments and let's actually survey some employees and let's see what we get, right? How many people truly have issues? How much money do we need to spend? And that's what they decided to do. And based on that pilot, they were able to extrapolate that data and say, okay, it looks like this is what we need for resources. This is what we need for budget. here's sort of what we think this program will evolve into over the next 6 to 12 months. So that might be something to think about, is try it on a small scale, get some data, get some of that feedback, and then go to the next step.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions around the differences, both pros and or cons. What do we think we are missing, or what are we able to do more efficiently in doing a virtual assessment, either via Zoom or I know Tiffany mentioned via photograph. So could someone talk a little bit about maybe some of the pros and cons of that, or do we feel like we're missing anything in those virtual assessments?
I can. Like I mentioned, one of the pros is that people are communicating a lot more with me on these one-on-one, and we use Teams meetings, to let me know what's going on, whether it's discomfort, things they like or don't like about their setup, their environment, different things like that that would not have usually been discussed in the office, especially in an open work environment. Some of the cons is definitely, like I mentioned, being able to see the whole picture, knowing what not only in their setup, but their environment that's affecting if they are having discomfort. What are they doing all day? What are the items outside of work that could be causing anything that we can help with? So also looking at their posture. Of course, everyone sits up pretty straight in those pictures and in the video. So I always assume they're about 30 degrees more forward than what I see on the picture. And that way I can sometimes see that on the video with the call. And if they laugh when I say that, then I know it's true. But we have a lot more open discussion on the phone calls than we did in the office. Another con is not being able to measure. So I will have them usually have a measuring tape available and just hope that they can measure correctly, looking at the height of their desk, chair heights, and the range if it does adjust. So that's been one challenge. And then the last biggest challenge has probably been people that live alone, that aren't able to have someone else take the pictures, so they're not in the pictures. And it's very difficult to evaluate just a chair and a desk without the person in it. So it leads to a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
Good comment. Thank you for sharing those, Tiffany. Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, yeah, I agree with everything that Tiffany said. Yeah, there's definitely, I think some of the pros is this one-on-one. It's kind of showing that the company cares. People can kind of get their voice be heard, which is sometimes rare. So I think that's really positive. Yeah, the working from home is a big issue. How do they take these pictures? So a couple of things we've done is you can actually take a different webcam or even take a phone, and then, they could use their phone and they can move their phone around in different positions to show you, like in real time, kind of what they're doing. I think one of the things, if you're going to do the home assessments, is finding somebody that actually has experience doing them and has done a lot of office type assessments. So that way they know the type of questions to ask, especially when you can't get a good picture. But if somebody describes some discomfort or something, you can kind of troubleshoot that, saying, based on other knowledge that you have, oh, that sounds like it's, the lumbar chair adjustment, or, the keyboard's too high. And it may be subtle in the picture. It might be an inch or two, but yeah, just having that experience to kind of talk them through the different scenarios and what they're experiencing, and maybe even actually have them try it. Right. Hey, can you do this? And tell me, how does that feel? So.
Exactly.
I'll tag on to what Ben just said, because one of the challenges I've always found is walking people through how to adjust the chairs, how to make the changes as you're talking to them, because you can't see them. You can't do it for yourself. How do you adjust that seat pan depth? And just learning over the years that, how the different ways that you can walk people through those things, because we all learn and experience things differently. So when you say something's on the paddle on the right side, not everybody understands the paddle and to lift. You have to be very explicit in your instructions. I don't know if Tiffany's had the same experience.
I have. So thankfully the chairs that we recommend are chairs that I often use, including my BodyBilt chair here. So it's easy for me, just like this, to tilt my camera down and actually go through the adjustments with the person while they're on video and be able to find that correct adjustment for the person, just like I would in the office. But it's actually better because now they're doing it, taking control of it instead of me doing it for them. So we kind of try to find the positive in that.
Right. And one of the things that we do as a manufacturer is we have all types of videos that show how to adjust every portion of our chair if needs be. And so the videos from manufacturers are extremely helpful, especially those from BodyBilt.
And another interesting thing, you talked about tape measures, right? Or how do you take measurements? So I've actually had people, pause and go get a tape measure. No, my desk is this. I did one the other day where the person didn't have any way to measure. So what we did is I said, well, how tall are you? Can you stand up? Can you stand beside this card table that you have, right? And then kind of reverse engineer, say, okay, if you're this tall and it's at mid-thigh, it's approximately this height, right? So that might be something to think about, using the person's own anatomy to try to take a measurement. So that's the tip for today.
always problem solving, ergonomics professionals. I do have a couple more questions, and note for anybody here today that all of the questions are being recorded, and if we don't get an answer to your specific question, it is going to be provided to our panel so that they can get back with you specifically on that. So a little bit of a follow-up to what you said, Ben. Is there a qualification criteria for who's doing these assessments? And can anyone speak to a cost range that an organization should expect to pay for these types of one-off virtual office assessments?
Yeah, I can start with the cost range. Typically, what you're seeing for a consultant, it's ranging from, let's say, $100 to $400, depending on what's involved as far as the type of report. Is there ADA issues? Is there complex workers' comp? That would be towards the upper end, but some of the more standard, straightforward would be towards the lower end. There's even some furniture manufacturers that actually offer this as a free service as part of their delivery on products. So you also have that at the other end. But I think really what you want to look at is you want to look at somebody that really has experience doing this type of work, and what are their credentials, what are their backgrounds. The office environment, at least from the home, there's so many variables. So you really want to get somebody that has depth of experience in this. So there's quite a range. Obviously, if somebody's a certified professional ergonomist, that's obviously one of the credentials that you probably want to look at. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that.
I'm just going to say thank you for the plug there on some of the manufacturers do offer that service. All of our sales representatives across the United States are certified ergonomic assessment specialists, CEAS. They've been trained. They're not CPEs. I just want to reiterate that. But they do have quite an extensive knowledge on ergonomics and fittings and evaluations. And so we can be a resource as well. But I'll let somebody else take over some time.
Actually, I am going to have to stop us there. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. What an informative panel and a diverse panel to share perspectives on home office ergonomics with us today. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to join us and share your experience with us. Again, if you have questions that didn't get answered, those are going to be provided to the panelists. Thank you all for being with us today. As I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded, and it will be available on demand later in the Ergo Central page on our website, www.ergoexpo.com. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.